Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be William Shakespeare. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels through the dreamscape. I think it's obvious what I might be talking about. I'll be talking about a comic book, the third in a series that I've been talking about for a little bit. That's about dreams and death and muses and such. I'll be talking about the Sandman, Volume 3, Dream Country. An interesting title. You have the cover, which is very interesting art. It just faces, and it's actually from one of the stories in this volume. What's interesting about this is that it's published around 89, 90. The interesting thing is that it's not one straight story in this volume. There's multiple stories. There's 4 different stories which detail either dream or death's adventures throughout time, which is interesting because it doesn't connect to the overarching story of Dream getting out of his imprisonment and trying to set his affairs in order as he finds that the world has changed in his time. I got this at the local library again. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. It's always a good decision. I don't think I need to say much about Gaiman. This was also articized in some way by Kelly Jones, Malcolm Jones III, Colleen Duran, and Charles Vess. Interesting people. I've seen them on the other volumes of Sandman, so it's clear these people have a unique art style that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I'll put pictures from the story in the video for everyone to see. So I will do some summary, some analysis, and we'll move on from there as I'm talking about Volume 3 here. So there is no straight story with the Sandman Volume 3. It's just multiple stories. The first story is about Richard Maddock. He is a struggling writer who is lacking inspiration. So he turns to a man named Erasmus who tells him that he managed to capture a muse, and he has imprisoned her for a number of decades. And as a result, he became successful as a writer. And so Erasmus gives Richard Maddock the muse. Her name is Calliope, referring to the Greek muse of Homer. And Maddock takes her home and rapes her, which is very extreme. And he is suddenly filled with inspiration, and he becomes a successful writer, but he refuses to let Calliope go. He also, he's successfully socially, and he's successful in terms of movies and his other endeavors as well. Calliope prays to some witches to fix her situation, but the only person who is willing to help her, because all the old gods are dead, is Dream, King Morpheus. Unfortunately, he is imprisoned at this time, as this takes place sometime in the events of the first book. And so Calliope can't be helped at this moment, and she's filled with despair because of that. But a short while later, Dream manages to get free, and he visits Richard Maddock and is like, free Calliope. People should not be imprisoned. This is wrong. You are being a monster. And Maddock refuses. So what Dream does is he curses Maddock to feel too much inspiration. He's constantly having one idea after another, and it drives him mad, to the point where he eventually calls Dream back and frees Calliope, which eases his pain, but also he's no longer filled with inspiration, which affects him as a writer. That's where that story ends right about there. The next story is about the dreams of cats. A prophet cat speaks to, and this sounds insane, I know, but it speaks to other cats, and it talks about how when that cat was younger, they had a litter of kittens, but the owners took the cats away and drowned them, took the kittens away. And so that cat fell into a bit of a despair and entered the dream world hoping to find a solution. And the king of cat dreams, which I believe is just dream in cat form, very ridiculous. But the king of cat dreams, they seek him out and they ask, like, what can we do? And the king of cat dreams, Cat Morpheus, informs the prophet cat that in the ancient past, humans used to be subservient to cats. Cats were very large, and humans groomed them and gave them a very fulfilling life in that way. But one day the humans dreamt of a better world where they were in charge, and that world was manifested. So the cat takes away that if the cats keep dreaming of a better world where cats are in charge, then eventually that will manifest itself. And there will be a better tomorrow for the cats. And that's where that story ends there. The next story involves William Shakespeare. Shakespeare was involved in the second volume as when Dream has an encounter with a man who he helped make immortal. He crosses paths with Shakespeare, and it turns out that Dream commissioned Shakespeare to write two plays. The first one is A Midnight Summer's Dream, which he is putting on a production of for Dream and his friends. And it turns out his friends are the fairy folk who Shakespeare kind of based A Midnight Summer's Dream on. The play is pretty successful, although the acting troupe is a bit worried about all the strange creatures in the audience. And the fairy folk, feel that the story rings true, although they acknowledge to Dream that not everything that Shakespeare is saying actually happened. And Dream says, well, it doesn't need to have happened. It just needs to represent a shadow truth where it rings close enough to reality to feel like it's a part of life in some sort of way. And so the play ends, and then the fairy folk vanish from this realm and decide never to return to the human realm. Whether or not that holds true in future volumes, that'll remain to be seen. And then in the final volume, a woman named Urania, who is Element Girl in the DC universe, finds herself in a pit of despair. She has been wanting to kill herself, but she has no means to do so because every time she tries, the elements adhere to her and help keep her living a little bit longer. Eventually she is approached by Death, who tells her, don't be filled with despair. You have options, and you can live your best life if you so choose. But she also tells her that the Egyptian god Ra made her a metamorph, which is just the kind of superhero that she was, and so she can appeal to the god Ra and seek her life to be ended that way. And she ends up doing that, staring directly at the sun, and that causes her to turn to dust and die. And so that's where that story ends there. The end of the volume with all four stories being told. In terms of analysis, there's a few things I want to talk about here. The first and foremost is the idea of myth making. All books, like every piece of media, is an attempt to make a myth, to create a legend or establish lore that is carried on through the ages. And sometimes it's successful, and other times it fails miserably. But I feel like this is a very direct attempt at myth making, rivaling that of the Greek and Romans and, various other cultures that have established strong lore that carries on today. With these 4 stories, Gaiman is telling tales. He's building the myth of King Dream, King Morpheus, and Death, their adventures and the wisdom that they parted on, such as the fact that you can manifest stuff through dreams, that seeking inspiration in a malevolent way, as through the first story, doesn't always end well, and you may get punished in some sort of way for doing so, and also Dream's interaction with Shakespeare and the inner meaning of that story right there. It does seem like Gaiman is building up myths and possibly even building on established ones, because dreams and death have existed in other mythologies. So he's contributing even more to that idea. And Gaiman would go on to do that even more in American Gods, where he just straight up, plucked mythological characters and started building on their stories even more, and even creating new gods and the American Gods, the TV boy, and the various medium and internet characters. So I think this is fascinating that how Gaiman does that, and so while this volume isn't following the plot of the overarching Sandman story, it feels like a nice diversion, because it's attempting to build up the legend of Death and King Dream, something that I don't feel it was doing so much in the first or second volumes. Gaiman started to do it in the second volume, but he really nailed it here by letting me know more about who Dream is and what he's done in the past and how he's interacted with his mantle of the King of Dreams. Another interesting thing about this story is what happens in the Shakespeare story. In the story, the fairies note that A Midnight Summer's Dream is funny and entertaining, and it kind of rings true. But not everything that is depicted in the story actually happened to the fairy. Actually happened to the fairy realm, I believe one of the fairies even calls it a straight up lie, to which Morpheus says, no, that it's not exactly a lie. There is some truth to it, and I'll read that for you now. So the one of the fairies says to King Dream, "We thank you, Shaper, but this diversion, although pleasant, is not true. Things never happened thus." "Oh, but it is true. Things need not have happened to be true. Tales and dreams are the shadow truths that will endure when mere facts are dust and ashes and forgot." Which I think is fascinating, because it's building on the idea of mythology. And it's also saying something about the truths and the stories that we tell, and how they're kind of a way of understanding the world, and especially of the past, when the actual accounts maybe haven't survived. What I think Dream is getting at there is this: A Midnight Summer's Dream need not have actually happened. The events need not have unfolded in the way they do. But the underlying story, the basis for it, rings true enough that it explains something about the human world or the fairy world that is enough to carry on. The humans will remember the fairy realm through A Midnight Summer's Dream and most likely other stories. So that's interesting what Gaiman seems to be saying about truths there, and I think it builds up on the mythology basis that Gaiman is talking about, because mythology is often our way of telling shadow truths about the world. A good example is Greek mythology, where the stories of Zeus and Perseus and Artemis and her bow, like those things never really happened, But they were a way for the Greeks to explain their interaction with the world in a way that made sense to them. They encountered the Minoan and the ruins of the Minoan and the Mycenae civilizations, and they didn't really have an understanding of who those people were who came before them. So they kind of made up stories about the Greek gods and other mythological figures that helped them to explain what these ruins and who the people were that came before. I feel like we do that even now in the movies and in the books and the video games that we have as a way of explaining the world. And those are shadow truths. They didn't exactly happen, but they explain our world in a way that helps us to make sense of it. There wasn't much I didn't like about the story. There's not a lot to talk about. It's pretty short otherwise. The one issue that I had with this is the fact that, again, it furthers the whole trope of violence against women in comic books, where the character Richard Maddock rapes Calliope. And I feel like he doesn't need to rape her. Maybe it shows that he's a bad person, but by holding a woman hostage for years, that already tells you that he's a bad person. So the rape feels extra and unnecessary. And it's really starting to seem like Gaiman leans on violence towards women as a crutch. For some reason, he's a good writer. I don't know why he has to lean on the whole violence towards women trope. So that's a small issue that I have with this story that I wish wouldn't come up in any future volumes, but it probably will. Anyway, those were my thoughts on the Sandman Volume 3, A Dream Country. A fascinating collection of stories that don't follow the main thread of what's going on with King Dream, but tells a fascinating set of stories that help explain our reality around us. I definitely recommend it. It's a good standalone, so you don't need to have read the first or second volume to really understand the third. And it's pretty entertaining and weird, like especially the story about cat dreams. Like that comes out of nowhere, and it's just hilarious to see a dream depicted in cat form. If you read this before, or you have a comment on something I said in my review, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this fun graphic novel. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can talk more about the Sandman and whether or not it will eventually be made into a movie and how we would go about doing that. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @AroundTheWeird so that we can talk more about interesting graphic novels. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Shakespeareish travels. Farewell.